Meet the one that personifies punishment. Here's your look at the Mezco Toyz Silent Hill 2, the 112 Collective Pyramid Head. Silent Hill's executioner comes complete with the tools of his macabre trade, including the great spear and great sword with blood splatter effects that attach to both weapons. The nightmare doesn't end there. A mannequin is included as well as a slew of creepers. Red Pyramid Thing has become the most well-known monster in the Silent Hill franchise. As the manifestation of James Sunderland's desire for punishment, the Red Pyramid Thing exists to remind James of his past actions, and the included signature weapons are instruments of James' inner torment. Believe me, you don't want to be around when you start hearing that dragging metal. Of course, before we get a closer look at the Mezco Silent Hill 2 112 Collective Red Pyramid Thing, or better known by many as Pyramid Head, let's grab the tape measure and see how tall the figure stands. Now, he has actually two different Pyramid Head configurations. The one that I'm going with is the one I'm going to be going with when it comes to displaying this guy on the shelf. You can see, or you'll see in a second, that there are differences between the two. Pyramid Head, though, based on this configuration alone, the figure you're looking at stands 8 inches in height, or it's going to be about 20 centimeters tall. Already graced by a couple of other Mezco's 112 Screamers, here's what the figure looks like with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 112 Collective Leatherface. Here's as well what the figure looks like with the Friday the 13th Jason Voorhees. And while maybe perhaps bookend on either side of him, the Jason Voorhees and the Leatherface are about the same scale to one another, Pyramid Head, though, obviously because of the big pyramid he has for the head, makes him a much taller figure of the three. First thing we'll have a look at for Pyramid Head, the figure comes included with the 112 Collective little baggie. I've actually not even taken the liberty yet of removing the little plastic piece that wraps around this, but basically you get yourself a little baggie that you can store all the accessories inside. I always like to, well, I don't write on the front of this, I suppose you could. In the other times of the other 112 collectives, I usually take myself a little label printer and I print on the front of it the name of the character. So like I print off, I have little labels for, of course, Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre's Leatherface, Friday the 13th Jason Voorhees, Halloween's Michael Myers. All the ones that I have, I usually just print on because my printing is atrocious and you only really get a one time and you're done unless you write over top of it a couple of times. I'm not going to do that. So I've actually just label printed. I'll probably do the exact same thing, I think, with Pyramid Head as well. The figure also comes included with an instruction sheet. That might seem a little bit vague right now. It will make better sense in a moment. Basically just tells you that he comes included with some blood splatter effects that can clip onto either one of his weapons that he wields, or can also clip around one of the figures. Oh, that sounds interesting enough. We're going to talk more about that also in a moment. Figure as well comes included with the 112 Collective standard size display stand. This time around it actually is kind of done in more of a dark caramel color. Silent Hill 2 is printed on the top. I don't know if you can actually see this or not, but the font itself is raised. It's got a nice little bit of texturing to it. Of course, it does have one peg that can attach to either one of the peg holes on the undersides of his boots, or you also get yourself the adjustable neck. Which again, I think in a case like this, for Pyramid Head, makes little to no sense. He's not going to necessarily, I guess he could be leaping in the air. I mean, hey, why not? I'm just much rather prefer to have the figure displayed, I think, more in a walking pose. If you did want to attach this onto the base, the easiest thing I find to do is flip around to the back and take the bottom nub here and just take that and push through the little peg piece. And then once that's popped out, then you just remove this, flip this around to the other side, and then plug it in place like that. And then, of course, you can just clip this around the figure's waist. I still feel like, again, like it doesn't make any sense for a character necessarily like Pyramid Head to be leaping in the air. But if that's an option that you wanted to go with, at least Mezco, as they always do, include that feature available. Mezco, once again, has included quite a lot of accessories this time around with Pyramid Head, as the figure comes included with blood splatter effects, comes included with weapons, comes also included with a mannequin, not to mention as well, he comes with 9 assorted creepers. These tiny little critters, I'm going to pick up one right now so you guys can see, you get 9 of these. 3 of these have sort of this look to them. I don't know if you can actually see, they're sort of like propped up on their legs. Well, these ones actually, you can see they're a little bit longer in configuration. and their legs are upright, or at least their front legs are upright. So they're a little bit varied by that. It seems like you get 6 of these, and you get 3 of these, but you get a total again of 9. Nice little detailed critters that can go along creeping with Pyramid Head, of course. I suppose you probably could have them scattered all across the figure's body. There's really no way to necessarily attach them onto his body, unless I suppose you could take a little bit of an adhesive. You really don't want to be doing that. Or you can basically just do what I'm going to be doing. I'm just going to have them sort of scattered around his legs as he's walking through them. All nice little detailed little kind of creepers. So you get 9 of those. Then you get a whole bunch of hands. Now, as of right now, I've got the figure holding gripping hands. You also may have very well started with closed fists, and I may have just popped them off and forgot all about them. The actual detail on them are okay. I will say, though, like the hands in some ways feel unfinished, but I don't really have a lot to base it against. I mean, Pyramid Head, you only see him really briefly, only in the games and in the movie. It's not necessarily a case where you see a real close-up look of his bandaged hands, which I'm guessing these are supposed to be. Closed fists, at least, you can see they've got a little bit of blood. I say a little. There's quite a lot of blood stained across the fingers and all along the bottoms of the gloves. You also get a pair of relaxed hands. Actually, these hands might actually be a good purpose to show you. They're very, very soft plastic. A lot softer, really, than I was expecting them to be. You get a couple of other gripping hands of various configurations. A couple of gripping hands. Now, these hands are actually better for holding his long, sworded blade. They're not the easiest to hold it, mind you. And then he also comes included with these as well. As you can see, they're all basically of the same configuration. Now, the figure also comes included. This is really interesting. I guess just before we talk about the blood splatter effects, the figure comes included with this big giant spear, the Great Spear. Kind of has more of a rusted look to it. It looks very hand-forged, very crude in design, but it looks like it certainly would implement a lot of serious damage. It's fairly sharp on the end. The plastic that they've used is, again, a little bit of pliable plastic, and it's got a nice sheen across it as well. It looks like it's actually been made of metal. And of course, most people would recognize this right away, the big dragging blade that he brings along with him. This looks, again, very crude. You can see sort of the impression, the indentations of the way that the blade looks like it's almost literally been hand-forged by Pyramid Head himself. The handle itself is, again, very primitive in design. This does fit in his hand, although it doesn't fit in his hand very well. I'm going to grab one of the hands that's really best for doing this. If you look at the actual hand, it doesn't curve as normally a gripping hand would be. Instead, it sort of looks like, a wrench. See how it's bent on the one side, bent on the other? The idea is you're supposed to take the handle, and at least these are soft enough plastic. You basically put it in on one side, and then you wedge it around the thumb on the other. And basically, that's how he's holding it. The problem that goes with this is that the hand is fairly soft and plastic, that I find it doesn't feel like it holds it as well as it should. And yet, if they had used a harder plastic, it would be a lot more difficult to get the hand to even hold the weapon. Now, of course, from this, it's just a case of popping off the existing hand from the peg. Then you just replace it with the new hand that you want to use. You can display it this way. What it doesn't do successfully, though, is it doesn't really give you the dragging feature. What I ended up doing at the beginning of this review was I kind of had it where I had it just resting against the inside of his hand. And he was sort of just dragging it this way. You kind of have to you could take the end of it also as well and just sort of rest it in his hand that way. And he's not holding as much the blade as he's holding the end of the blade. That might be one way to sort of have him dragging the sword or dragging the big blade that he has in the game, in the movie. Now, the figure, I already said, though, did come included with all these splatter effects. So you get splatter effects. You get a small one, and you get a larger one here, mainly used and mainly designed for the spear. If you look at the end of it, you'll see, on the back end of it, you'll see there's a little hole right there. You take that, and you just plug it onto the end of the spear. Now, you don't have to plug it all the way. You don't have to push it all the way down, because it may lose a little of the illusion. But just have it basically on the end like that. Or you can also, makes probably a little bit more sense to twist it around. So it looks like it actually has penetrated something or someone. Translucent red plastic, this time around used for all the blood splatter effects. Now, there's that size. Or there's also this size also as well. And again, works the same way. You basically want to cap the end of the spear. Just plug it on the end of it like that. You got a blood splatter effect for the spear. It looks really good. I like the way that works. Now, there's also ones here for this blade. Now, there's this one that basically just sort of rests against the blade like that. And it gives you kind of like the end, where it looks like he's slashed into somebody. There's also these ones that kind of look more like swooshes, like he's slashed through somebody. And this is just a case you're going to... So if you look at the inside, there's sort of like a little canal of plastic. It's just enough to accommodate the end of the blade, and it actually stays really well on there as well. Now, there's a shorter version, so again, like it looks like you'd be, slashing it this way, or there's also a longer version as well, and it works the exact same way. Just slide the blade onto the end of it, and you have a really interesting... Now, this is something that seemed to have been introduced with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Leatherface. I'm glad to see that they've carried this over as well for Pyramid Head. Now, you could also, in theory, have it like this way, too. But, I mean, that's not going to really look as convincing. What you'll do instead, again, is just line it up on the end. And it really does stay in place. The last of the accessories, at least the blood splatter variety, is he has this thing that kind of looks like a pair of hands reaching out to you. If you take yourself a 112 collective, I'm just going to bring Jason Voorhees in for this. You take the end of it, or this back side of this will go on the back torso of any of the 112 collective figures. And you basically just fit this around the front like that. You want to make sure that there's entry and an exit wound on both sides. It basically just looks like someone has just been gouged. So like if you took the spear, for example, and you pretended like, of course, he just... Probably be a little less convincing for a character like Jason Voorhees, but again, like this basically just clips on the back of it, and you got the blood splatter effect on either side. I think that's really neat. So let's move everything out of the way. The other accessories that come included with Pyramid Head, you get yourself the mannequin. I like this on paper. I like the idea of a mannequin actually being included with Pyramid Head. And for all intents and purposes, the Pyramid Head mannequin does look pretty good. It's fairly basic in design. It has articulation. There's a swivel cut there and a swivel cut there, and you can swivel actually both the legs, or what would be, of course, the arms on the top there. The problem with it, though, is that the lower legs have to be one configuration. It's the only way it'll properly balance. Even though there is really the means to actually turn the legs, anything past what I just finished doing, it's not going to let the actual mannequin stand properly. You have to only have it one way. And even then, even to get it back defaulted to where I thought it was, again, you're just going to want to wiggle it back and forth just to make sure it's properly in place. Because, again, like if you move the leg just ever slightly, there are technically peg holes in the undersides of the feet. So if you wanted to have it in any other configuration than I have it right now, I suppose you could probably use yourself the Silent Hill 2 display stand. But yeah, again, I feel like in a case like this, if there's only one way, one possible way, and one plausible way of having the mannequin posed, why not just make it staction? Or at the very least, staction the bottom half of it, basically just making it a statue with no posability whatsoever, and only have the posability at the top. Then, again, you'd be able to move the things around the limbs that you want, and isn't necessarily going to affect the stability of it. So again, you can just still have it standing. But yeah, the bottom half of it really should have just been all just a basic block, essentially, and just only had the top two things as the things that actually did move on it. I like the look of the mannequin, though, as just a little side accompanying piece. As for the last accessory that comes included with Pyramid Head, you get a configuration slightly varied from the one that we got, or at least the one that we're going to be starting with. The differences between the two is that this pyramid has a little more detailing. It's a little bit more intricately sculpted. But what it doesn't have, though, is it doesn't have the height or the reach of this one. There's a little bit more of a smoother configuration there on the front and on the sides. This actually kind of looks a little bit more like a doorstop. This one has, again, a lot more going for it. What it doesn't have, though, unfortunately, is while it has some interesting sculpting on the inside, it doesn't have sort of that fleshy, tissuey interior that Pyramid Head would normally have. So if you like the idea of having all this extra stuff, and you certainly appreciate the fact that it has all this extra stuff, then this head sculpt's not going to have that. It's only going to be this one here. Changing out the heads, though, is fairly easy. You're just going to hold on to the torso, pop the head off from the provided peg, and then plug the new head in place. Just like that. And then you have this version of Pyramid. I mean, like, it looks nicer, I think, than this one. But I like the idea that this one has all, again, like the tissue inside. It just looks a lot grosser and gnarlier. So I'm going to stick with this head sculpt, really, of the two. And again, just pop that back off the ball joint. I suppose actually before we put this head back in place, I wanted to actually show you guys what the body looks like, because of course a lot of this gets masked by the fact that the head's going to be over top of it. The top of it does have the straps. Now the straps themselves look like they're more of a faux leather material. He's got straps there also here in the front. Really nice additional stainage that they've added all across his body here. This smock that he wears, oh, by the way, it does have a wire frame, so that's kind of a neat thing also that they've included. But I love that they've stained it. It's kind of more, it looks more like wine stain than it does actually blood stain. But you could say as well, like it's stains that have settled there for a long, long time. And it's everywhere on the figure's body. He does technically have a zipper, so you can open this if you wanted to and just completely take it off. But I don't know really why there would be a reasoning for that. And of course, underneath that is, I would imagine, a regular 112 collective body. The arms themselves are fairly sculpted with a muscular tone to them. They're kind of more of an off grayish, kind of a bit of a slight purple tint, honestly, to it. But it's got a really interesting wash that they've done to it. Now, again, it's consistent with the arms as well as the head. And I would imagine if you were to kind of move everything out of the way, the body underneath it probably would be also the same as well. Now, he does have pants, so it's not just a case the smock goes right directly down to the floor. Underneath is the pants. They're as equally stained as the smock itself. And again, you've also got the really big, gnarly boots that he wears as well. Love the look of these boots. If I could really pull this off, I would wear boots like this around town all the time. And again, you got little buckles there on the fronts and both the sides. Peg holes on the undersides of their feet. So again, if you wanted to, you could plug it onto the display stand provided. Let's go ahead and just get Pyramid Head's head back in place. You'll see there's a peg right there, a peg hole. And that's just going to plug very easily onto the peg that's on the end of his neck. It just plugs in place like that. Now, for the figure's articulation, as it probably goes without saying, it's going to be a little more limitations just because, again, like his head's going to take up a lot of real estate space. The head, from a moving standpoint, you can only really move it back and forth this way, and that's really it. The thing I'm also really worried about, too, is by moving it back and forth, if that's not going to start to scrape the top of his shoulders over time. But again, to get a Pyramid Head figure, you kind of know the territory that goes along with that when it comes to posability. You're not going to be able to do much of anything. Shoulders, though, at least, can actually come out at 90 degrees. There's enough clearance, at least in this case, that you can bring the arms at 90 degrees, and you can still move the arms forward, move the arms back. The figure has a bicep swivel, a double hinge on the elbow. Hands rotate also all the way around. And then when you get the torso underneath the smock, it's on a very generous ball joint. You can move not only the top this way, but then there's a secondary ball joint right around here. You can move it also there as well. Legs split out, and because the way they've overlapped the smock, basically won't limit the articulation when it comes to his legs. So you can bring the legs again forward, you can bring them back. There's a swivel at the top of the thigh. There's a double hinge, it seems, on the knees. No articulation from the boot standpoint of things, but at least you can move the ankle back and forth and rock it back and forth here as well. Pyramid Head, I saw the announcement of this, or at least where I picked this up was Entertainment Earth. I saw the listing for this guy a while ago, and I got in on the pre-order, luckily. He is still available as of right now over on their site, and he goes about the same price point as normally would go with 112 collective figures, so he's about that $90 to $100 price. I think well worth it, certainly if you're a fan of Silent Hill and you're a big fan like I am of Pyramid Head. I love the fact that they gave you as many accessories as they did. Pyramid Head would be one of those cases where I think there's a lot of potential to work with when it comes to possibilities for included accessories. I mean, at the end of it, we did get a lot more hands, I really thought, than what we needed. We got a whole bunch of creepers, which that's always a nice touch when it comes to displaying the figure. And of course, for good measures, you also get yourself a mannequin. Negative points, I would say, is like the mannequin, as I bring the mannequin in right now. It's just impossible to stand properly unless you've got it always in one configuration, which again leads me to think like they should have just made like the lower half staction. That's it. Why even put posability in there if you can't even move it? Again, I love the idea that they included a secondary head sculpt. I wish there was honestly an easier way for him to be dragging the sword around. Again, like you kind of just have him holding the end of it. And that seems to be the best approach. And of course, love the fact that they included all the blood splatter effects. A really nice release. I'm glad I got this one from the folks over at Mezco Toyz. Now, as you probably would imagine, that blood splatter effect, while looking good, does add some unnecessary weight to the end of the blade that Pyramid Head is doing his best to try to hold in his hand. His hands, already mentioned, are softer plastic that were a hard time already to hold the blade, and now you're adding all this additional plastic weight on the end of it. Now, I've already had this arm starting to droop. The only few moments that I've had the figure displayed like this, the arm is already starting to droop just because it's just too heavy for the character to bear. The head sculpt is also nice. I've decided to alternate things because I did start the review, after all, with the defaulted head. I went with the more intricately sculpted head for wrapping up the review. The head sculpt just being something that's going to plug onto the ball joint, for most of the cases would allow the head sculpt to have full range of motion. But because of the size of the head as it is, it's Pyramid Head after all, his articulation in his head is going to be a lot more limited. You can still gain all the additional articulation, so if you want to have him more in a dynamic pose, it can still be pulled off in the shoulders, of course the waist, the abdomen area, and in the legs, but the head sculpt is going to be very limited, just because, again, you can only turn it really side to side. Really happy with how this one turned out. I'm not as happy with the way that the mannequin turned out, but I mean, like, I'm never going to really move the legs anyway, so just to say I wish the figure was staction, that's something I could just easily do by not touching it. I'm just not going to touch it. That's all I'm going to do. What do you guys think of Pyramid Head? Have you had the chance to already pick up this one for yourself? And let me know down below in the comment section, what's your favorite Silent Hill game? Also, if you guys enjoyed this video, I want to hit it with a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing and certainly would like to stick around for more, if you haven't already done so, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below and that you're also turning on the bell notification. Of course, as always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.